Welcome to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. I'm your host, Fabian motherfucking Ojeda, and I don't know shit, but that's okay. All right, let's get this shit started. Thank you everybody for listening to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. Hope y'all enjoyed our previous episode with Master Daniel Pesina, the original Johnny Cage, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, the original Mortal Kombat, right? But I'm back today with a brand new guest. I want to welcome to the podcast for the very first time. He goes by the name of Autonex. How you doing, man?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, I like that spelling. You know, I was asking you, hey, how do you pronounce this, right? I want to make sure I got it right. Did you come up with that?
Yeah, and I knew that was going to kind of be the thing. Was most people when they read it will say Autonex, but you know, I get to kind of choose the correct way, and I think Autonex just has a little bit better of a ring to it. But yeah, it's so auto is self, and nex is like tied to or bridge or connected. So just kind of that like interconnectedness to yourself is where that comes from.
Hey, but you know what? It's a talking point, man.
Yeah, exactly.
It's always a talking point. Like it's like back when Prince just went by his symbols. Like, what the hell do I do with this? Like,
right.
People trying to figure it out. So hey, when people are trying to figure it out, at least you're on their mind, right?
Yep, exactly.
So you're a Texan.
Yeah. New Texan. It's been here for 7 months now. Yeah. I got here actually probably about exactly 7 months ago. We got here October 5th. So
what part of Texas?
San Antonio.
San Antonio.
Mm-hmm.
So where were you originally from?
Utah, the Salt Lake area. Okay. So
not too far, right? Not venturing too far.
Yeah, I mean, it felt far, man. That drive, that drive is brutal. I mean, half of it is through Texas. Takes, like 8 or 9 hours just to drive through Texas.
For sure. Yeah, no. I always anytime I have somebody from Texas on now, because I have a friend who moved from California to Texas. I always ask people from Texas, how about that Whataburger?
Yep. It took me a while to try. I actually just had it for the first time like 2 months ago. And I didn't go in with very high expectations, and honestly, it kind of blew me away. I think I'm a fan of Whataburger.
Well, you had In-N-Out before?
Oh yeah.
And let's piss some people off here. Let's start off hot, right? What's your preference?
That is hard. I feel like I still would say In-N-Out. Yeah. And yeah, I feel like I might get castrated here in Texas for saying it. But I don't know. I mean, I do not like the fries at In-N-Out. And I know it seems like everybody agrees to that, yet so many people still like them. I don't understand it.
I mean, you put all that stuff on it, it's fine. But I agree with you 100%. I'm like, I found some undercooked green fries in there. I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
Other than fast food, man, we're here to talk about your music, right? And I wanted to, how would you classify, right? What genre would you say your music will fall under?
Oh man, that is the question. I have kind of just ended up going with experimental bass music. Just electronic experimental bass music, mainly because I'm not sure what else to call it. It's right. Especially in this day and age where the lines between genres are blurring so much. I'm just making whatever comes out.
Yeah, and it's hard nowadays, like, to put a label on things, right? Because there's been so much meshing of styles over the years and whatnot. I always I find it funny when I ask people, hey, what genre? Because some people like me, it's just like, dude, it's just, like, for example, if you're listening to like a rock song, it's just rock, right? But then there will be people like, well, it's post-hardcore sub, all this other stuff is like, I don't know what the hell that is. I'm like, if it, I know what I like, right? So it's experimental bass music, right? Would you say there's other artists that kind of fit like this mold, this sound that you kind of sound like, or is it something that you're just kind of venturing into that's like brand new territory?
Um, I mean, I think I like to think that I'm getting into some really brand new territory just with, feedback I've gotten of, people saying like I've never heard anything like this, which is the best feedback I can possibly imagine getting, which is cool to, really be getting that. But I still very much draw inspiration really from anyone who is doing just very new, different stuff. So, Champagne Drip is finding a lot of success and he's just created his own sound. There's Tape B who's on the come up. Just saw him live and he's got a very unique sound, really cool. So, I'm definitely not the new one or the only one to be going into new territory. And I think that's what's really cool about the electronic music scene in general is
Mhm.
people are a lot more open and really kind of want to hear something new, something different.
Mhm.
More so than a lot of other genres, I think. I think most other genres they get kind of caught up in, a specific sound.
Yeah. I mean, there's only so many notes, you can put together on a guitar, like I think
Right.
one thing that's always interesting, like when I go on YouTube and watch these videos where people think they figured everything out, they're like, oh my God, this song rips off this other song. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. I mean, it's not similar, right? Got similar melodies and everything like that. I'm sure they didn't rip anything off. It's like again, you can only string together so many notes in so many ways. But I think the benefit of like electronic music is now that you have such a larger range, right? You can put different sounds together and you can go a lot higher, a lot lower, right? And it really, when you're talking about experimental, right, you can really get experimental and get in there and do some stuff that is like, I wonder if anybody's ever tried this before, you
Right.
know. So how did you venture into getting into like the experimental bass music? Like this isn't your first foray into music, right? You went under a different moniker before.
Right. Yeah. So my old alias, I mean, it's always kind of been there. I think I've always just sort of created the music that just sounds right in the moment. Um, but I did try to fit into more of a mold before this with this new project. I'm really finding um how to make music for myself, which you hear that all the time.
Mhm.
And I thought that I was doing that, but now I'm really understanding that like it's hard to make music without the motivation of, I want a bunch of people to listen to this so that I
Mhm.
can play on a main stage and or even the I want to prove all these people wrong that said that I couldn't do it. When you make music for that, you're making music for somebody else.
Mhm.
And I think that just really clicked for me of like, I need to make this music for myself. I just need to do what I like, what I hear, and do it to the best of my ability, not get too caught up on the audio engineering side of things, which I very much do. I have a lot of insecurities around that, but I'm learning to just kind of get past that.
Mhm.
So just kind of came with the new name, just whole rebrand, whole new me.
Cool, man. Yeah. And I'm not too, familiar with, kind of like newer styles of music or, I'm still stuck in 70s, 80s, and 90s, early 2000s, maybe, right? But I kind of hear, yeah, and I listen to your song Surrender on YouTube, right? I kind of hear like elements. Would I be right in saying it's kind of like, some dubstep in there and whatnot, right? Would that be correct?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to my live shows, like I do like to still play a lot of, I guess more mainstream dubstep and or maybe not so much mainstream, but falls within the sound.
Mm.
So I still definitely draw a lot of inspiration from that.
Yeah, sure. And then like the electronic music scene has gotten so big. I remember, rock shows used to be the thing, right? Early 2000s, and as time went by, I actually one of my side jobs before used to be, bouncer, bodyguard, whatever you want to call it, right? And I would do a lot of shows, and it went from being a lot of rock shows to like a lot of raves, right? And it's kind of crazy how how big those became, and now they're massive, right? You're talking about like EDC and things like that, and it's across multiple days, and people are spending thousands of dollars on this, right? So it's a pretty big, there's a lot of opportunity there, right? What are your aspirations? What do you want to do? I know you want to make music for yourself, right? But where do you see yourself fitting in, right? What's the goal there?
I mean, kind of the selfish goal, I should say, from day one has always been I really want to travel the world. And
Mm.
that kind of started out as my initial motivation to get into it was, what better way to be able to travel the world if than like getting paid to do it and getting to go play this music that I love.
Yeah.
Um, so world tour is always just kind of like that's my big goal. Um, and I mean, again, like you said, with the EDM scene just blowing up and this rave scene blowing up, there are so many different niches you can hit, depending on the show. I mean, house music is always going to be huge. Dubstep is really big in the US, but now we're seeing an uptick with drum and bass, and it's just always evolving. So I'm just gonna take whatever I can get. Whoever wants to listen is
Yeah.
where I'm shooting for.
And is that like the style of music that you really grew up enjoying and listening to and going to concerts for, or do you have like a good mix in there?
It's interesting is growing up, I was never big into music. I think my family really just wasn't super big into music, other than my sister. My sister moved out to New York. She lives out in New York, is pursuing what wants to get on Broadway.
Mm.
So she's a lot more into like musicals and whatnot. But other than that, I just always listened to what my friends were listening to. When I got into high school, I started, I went and discovered My Chemical Romance, All American Rejects, and all of that for myself. And that's kind of where it started for me of listening to music that and like going and finding music. And then the year after I graduated was when I went to my first rave, and it was like instantly fell in love with EDM.
Mm.
And that's kind of where it all started for me. So it is weird. I don't have much of a musical background. And, if telling anyone from high school that I'm pursuing a career in music, they
Uh-huh.
just like no one would have seen this coming.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, how did you get into like starting, to call yourself a musician? That's like you said, it's not really your identity. People don't really put two and two together. It's like, how did that come about?
So this is 100% credited to my best friend, my day one. He's like a brother to me. I've known him my whole life, actually known him my whole life. Don't have a memory of meeting him because I've known him for so long.
Uh-huh.
But his dad does movie scores and video game scores for Warner Chappell. So my friend had grown up learning how to at least kind of maneuver Ableton, help his dad with little things, and we started raving together. And he told me one day, "Hey, I just ordered a DJ mixer, and I'm going to learn how to DJ, and I'm going to pursue this." And I had the thought cross my mind before, like a couple months earlier, but I didn't really entertain it because again, I'm like, I don't know anything about music.
Mm-hmm.
So like it just didn't even seem realistic. But as soon as he told me he was going to do it, then I started thinking, well, this would be cool. Can I learn this with you?
Right.
So I was going to wait for him to get his mixer and then ask him. And we were driving to a show, it was Zed's Dead's show. Um, and he turned to me and he says, I was going to wait until the mixer got here, but I'm going to ask now, like, do you want to learn how to do this with me? And
Mm.
we can do kind of a duo. And it's like, yeah, that's great. I was going to ask you the same thing.
Uh-huh.
So when he got that, we learned how to DJ together, just spent, hours every day just messing around with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then he started teaching me Ableton. I got a little more into that until eventually I got my own laptop, got Ableton on it, and just started doing it my own. And he has since stopped pursuing music. He's pursuing other things now. But, if it weren't for him, I wouldn't have ever started. And now this is,
Mm-hmm.
it's the only thing I really want to do with my life.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And that being said, I always ask musicians, right? Because for some, it's like, okay, I do this as like a hobby. Some it's like it's just a passion of mine. And then others like, no, 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 no. This is what I want to do, right? This is the path I'm taking. But when it comes to that, a lot of people, are like, hey, that's a pipe dream, right? Do something real with your life. Even I was mentioning a previous guest, the guy who played Johnny Cage in Mortal Kombat. He's been doing this martial arts stuff and helping be like a stunt guy, and he's a video game icon at this point, right? Even in his, I think, what is it, in his 50s or whatever, his parents are still asking him like, "You gonna get a real job?" So do you have those people that are like, "Hey, why don't you do something else?" Right? And how do you respond to that?
I have been very, very fortunate to not really have had a lot of that. My dad has always been a lot more traditional, so I very much expected my dad to be like that. But my sister, had just picked up her life, moved to New York out of the blue just because she wanted to pursue that, and my parents fully supported her. Um, but she was older than me. She also very much had her life a lot more together at the time.
Mm,
So I was kind of worried about it, but I started mentioning it. And, to my dad's credit, he really came to me and was just, so interested in asking me all these questions and has always been extremely supportive. Both my parents have, and my whole family has.
mhm.
Um, but, obviously you do hear a lot of it. And a lot of it is just in people's tone of voice when you tell them like, oh, I'm a music producer or I'm a DJ
Mhm.
or, I'm an artist. You can kind of hear when people just like, oh, like that's nice. And they just don't really take you seriously, which used to really bug me. And I felt a need to be taken seriously. And that's something I'm kind of learning again to just let go of. Um, but to their point, I think it is so easy to view as a pipe dream because it is a pipe dream if you think that you're just going to make music, upload it to DistroKid and let it go out and do that for a little bit and you're just going to start making millions of dollars.
Mm,
Like it does take so much more than that, especially in this day and age where you can do it independently is makes it a lot more accessible, but makes it a lot more work
mm,
for you as the individual. So, being able to stay on top of social media and which still learning that and
mm,
learning how to manage your own business. And, I'm to a point right now where I work from home. I'm essentially on salary. So I'm kind of my own boss, which
mm.
is everybody's dream. But with that comes a lot of responsibility of like, if I don't want to work, I don't have to. But like, I don't have anything holding me accountable except for myself.
Right. Yeah.
And so, it's a learning curve for that.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, and it sounds like, there's flexibility, but what you're saying is like, there's got to be that plan too, right?
Right.
'Cause if you don't have a plan, it's kind of just like, well, here's the dream, that's A, right? Here's the goal, that's C, and what's B, right? What's
Right.
in between? There was there's an old South Park episode where they talk about the underwear gnomes, where it would be perfect for this scenario here, right? It's like, A equals underwear, C equals, profit, B, mm, right? But a lot of people kind of try to operate in that way just because, I don't know, man. It might be a generational thing. I guess I'm technically a millennial, right? I hate saying it. But we kind of always have like this in back of our heads, like, I should be famous by now, right? like,
Right.
like I don't know when you grew up, but like to me, it's like a lot of people have this, for some reason, this thought in the back of their head, like I should have been famous by now. Like at some point, I should have done something to make me a celebrity or something like that, you know. But it just doesn't work that way. You actually have to put in the work, and you have to do, a lot more than a lot of people are willing to do. Like you mentioned the social media piece, man. I hate that part, man.
Right.
Like I consider myself just a hobbyist doing the podcast thing, but I know every now and then I'm like, oh damn it, I have to post on Instagram. I have to, post on YouTube and all this stuff. I'm like, okay, it's a chore, you
Right.
know, it's a real chore because for me, people listen, they listen, right? But for you, you want to make this your thing. I can imagine you really got to put in hours and figure out like, what are people gravitating towards, right? How do we get the eyes and ears on this, right? Even something as simple as like your branding, right? Like I noticed on your album cover, right? You have a very distinct kind of, that purple tinge, you even have that right now in your background, right? Like it must be like your favorite color or something like that. But, I thought it looked cool, right? And for the image that I'll put out for this episode, right, I kind of played off of that a little bit. And so I think it draws a lot of eyeballs in, and that has to do, with again trying to have a plan and attracting people. Is that I'm sure it's not by accident, right? The whole, picking the right colors and everything.
Right. Yeah. And, that was sort of my whole idea. Well, so Chrissy, the one that
Mhm.
originally connected us, so she is my business coach. Essentially, I hired her specifically to help me with marketing and branding and
Mhm.
social media. And we had started talking back when under my old alias, and I wanted to hire her then, but it just finances were tight. It was just not a great time.
Mhm.
And then when I decided to rebrand, then I reached out to her and I said, "Hey, like I want to rebrand. Do you want to help me build this from the ground up because I want to do this the right way?"
Mhm.
So fortunately, I've had her that's just been coaching me and essentially, she's basically become my manager. She's
Mhm.
helped so much with she's been very hands-on with this and it's been a lot of fun because it really feels like she's just kind of my teammate helping
Yeah.
me with it. So definitely been a lot more planned and it's I've been doing a lot more of it myself. Like I'm finally learning how to use like Canva and CapCut and
Wow.
learning that I don't have to outsource everything.
Yeah. Yeah, everything is like much more like DIY these days, Like I think anybody who's putting any sort of content out there, you kind of have to be a jack of all trades, right? I didn't know I was a graphic designer until I had to be, I think that's something it's a skill that a lot of people are picking up, like because if you notice too, like it's kind of by necessity too, like when the pandemic hit, right? And everybody was locked up at home and whatnot. I don't know if you noticed, but everybody became a podcaster. Everybody became a person that was selling food from home. Everybody became, some sort of entrepreneur, right? And you start seeing their logos pop up, right? And that's cool, man. That's cool, because it makes it more personal, makes it your thing, and it seems more authentic, right? And that's always a good thing, because you feel it more,
I am.
and so with that being said, right, what's some feedback you've gotten from from people as you're venturing into this, right? I mean, like, what kind of support have you received?
Um, I mean, again, all more support than I feel like I deserve a lot of times. My family's always been huge support. I've always been blessed to be surrounded by other creatives. Moving out here, we rented this house. I'm here with moved out here with three of my friends. One of them has since had to move back to Salt Lake, but
Mm,
um, the other three of us were, they both rap. They're both getting more into singing, which is fun. That we're
mhm,
experimenting more with that. So I've always been surrounded by other creatives and people that I can bounce ideas off of. Um, but it's before I was part of an artist collective. That's how I met these guys originally.
mhm,
And that was when I very first got into the music, and like all these other people that I was working with had been doing music for years at that point. So I always had other people to kind of go off of, learn from. They were sort of the guinea pigs. And now that I've, separated myself from that and I'm a lot more uh, independent, and now it's like these guys, I think, look to me more of how are you doing it? And that's just more so because I did start finding a little bit of success with my last alias. And so I kind of have an idea of that. And again, I've hired a coach and learning all these things. So I'm sharing those resources, but uh, it's been interesting learning how to essentially support myself and have to again be my own boss and learn it and fail and learn from my failures.
yeah. Well, I mean, you got to take, those bruises and get back up, right? Because sometimes, you need a little bit of reality to hit you in the face, right? Um, you got to know what works and what doesn't and whatnot. Um, and so sometimes it's like, well, because you are taking on a lot of the, like doing your own, like logos and all that stuff, logos or like visuals and things like that. You're like, oh, this is cool. It's the best thing ever. And if maybe somebody gives you some feedback, it's not that great. You might take it a little more personally, right? But I think, it also gives you an opportunity to be like, okay, I, I accept that. It was kind of like the first pancake, right? I tried cooking that first pancake, it sucked, right? It wasn't all the way through. It was too mushy, or it was burnt, right? So you kind of get in this like, let me try again, let me try again, let me reinvent, and you've kind of seen that again because now again you're going by a different moniker and everything, right? You're starting over, and so that's cool to see, but with that, with changing, what was your former, I mean, if you don't mind talking about, what was your name or alias?
Yeah, it was Four Eyes, Four-I-Z.
Hmm.
So yeah, I kind of quick story behind that.
Real quick
But
though, I like Autonex better, but go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. Yeah, I do too. And I mean, honestly, it also kind of comes with like Four Eyes was because I didn't feel like people took me seriously, then it was almost my way of like beating them to the punchline of,
Mm,
oh, I'm making fun of myself. But it also very much was kind of accepting, my own flaws that I had no control over because I have not great eyesight. I hated glasses when I was a kid because I felt like I got bullied, which probably was not as bad as I made it up in my head. I'm realizing this years later.
mhm,
Um, and I did contacts for a while, but oh, I hate contacts because they just ruin your eyes.
mm,
And one day while I was producing, I just realized like, man, I am breaking my back just getting right up as close to the screen as I can just so I can see. I'm like, I don't need to do this. Like, I don't have a problem wearing glasses anymore.
mm.
Like I don't care. Like I just need to see. So got glasses and then I just kind of created my whole identity around it for that. Um, but
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. You probably at some point thought like, oh, Four Eyes is the coolest thing ever,
I
right? This is so great. and maybe you got some feedback and it's like, the hell, like I thought this was good. No, this is great. In your head you probably maybe very briefly maybe struggled with that, like I can't believe this is, I you're wrong, I'm right, but that's what I'm talking about, when you're starting to do things on your own, and you're forced to just kind of look at things realistically and be like, yeah, maybe four eyes isn't the greatest,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, again, that's all growth, right? And especially in something like music, right? If you're going to stay stagnant and you're going to be like, no, this is the best, this is the best, this is the best, and you're not willing to hear that feedback and run with it, you're going to be stuck really quickly. Like I did a little bit of music, and I remember back in the day, before there were a lot of websites where you could post music. Um, my friends and I used to, when we were in a band, we used to use this website. It was actually called GarageBand, but then I think maybe they lost some sort of legal battle to GarageBand on the
Right.
whole Apple whatever. But the way you would get your music up there is that you would have to either pay like $20 per song to upload it so other people could listen to it, or and only people that were registered could listen to it, or you would have to review 20 songs of other artists in order to post one song, right? And to me, that was like the biggest, like, oh, cool, I'll just do it. That's free. I love writing and I can give fair reviews on this and everything like that. And I remember putting my band's songs up and just being so like, what do you call it? Like blindsided by, how people are on the
Oh
internet,
yeah. Oh yeah.
especially musicians, right? They're the most opinionated jerks out there. And I'm just like, hey, we're a bunch of 17-year-old kids making music. I'm thinking in my head, like, wow, this is the greatest stuff ever. And then put the songs up there, it's like, oh, the quality's crap. And then, this is, the drummer doesn't know what he's doing. I was a drummer, right? The singer can't sing. And it's like, whoa, what the hell did I spend,
Right.
all this time, being nice and giving other people, praise on their music. It can be one of those things where feedback can be kind of crushing, right? Um, what's maybe some of the best feedback you've received and some of the worst feedback you've received?
Oh, I mean, kind of depends on your definition of best and worst, right? So, I mean, the hardest feedback for me to receive, I had just finished my first album, like the Four Eyes one, and
Mhm.
I was sending it out to a bunch of different producers that I followed on Twitter
Mhm.
and just looking for people to do remixes and wanted to do a remix album, which ended up doing, and it turned out awesome.
Mhm.
One of the guys that I sent it to, he was one of the first producers, like underground producers I had started following when I first got into music.
Mhm.
And he came back to me and in very polite terms basically told me my mixdowns were shit. And it was devastating because I just was thought, they were so good. It just sounded like I was doing what everyone else did.
Mhm.
But, I kind of just I tried to ignore it and tried to just, and then dropped the album and listening to it on Spotify, one of those songs coming on after one of my favorite songs that inspired me
Mhm.
and just hearing the difference in it
Mhm.
just was like, oh, I get it now.
Mhm.
Which was again it was very demoralizing. I don't think I touched Ableton for like 3 months after that
Yeah.
because I had to take a break from it.
Mhm.
But ultimately that was what motivated me to, okay, like I don't know what I'm doing. I have to admit that I have no idea what I'm doing with audio engineering. So let me learn. And so I went and took a class at a production school called SLDP, Salt Lake DJ and Production. And, it's just small school is like above a wedding dress shop. But they've got a really nice studio built in it. They've
Mhm.
got the uh the Nexus 3000s. So they've got solid gear, and the classes were really small. My class was
Mhm.
like, 4 or 5 people.
Mhm.
So it was very one-on-one, and I learned so much. took me miles ahead of where I was. But the more I learned and the more I developed my an ear is now the more I critique my own music because of it.
Right. Hmm.
So yeah, it's very double-edged. So that in a lot of ways that was the best and the worst feedback. It
I
was the
see.
uh hardest pill to swallow, but the best for me.
Hmm. Maybe sometimes we need to get slapped across the face, right?
Um,
Because yeah, again, like when it's so personal, it's like this is mine. Like
right.
I did this. Like it's great, you know. But yeah, I mean that's why there's different levels to this, right? People that have been doing it for a while, maybe if they're not the nicest or anything like that, they kind of know what they're talking about sometimes, and maybe it's important to even listen to those not so nice comments every now and then.
Mhm.
Um, moving on, right? I don't have like a great understanding of, electronic music and things like that. Like, I'll be honest, and this is gonna sound like, oh well, you're just not a fan of that music. You're a jerk, but I always used to just be like, I don't understand how people can just go watch, somebody who's like a DJ, right? Like to me, it's just like, okay, so they press play and they stand there and they dance. I'm like, it's not a live show, right? Like I'm big into like watching musicians on the guitar and the drums. Like you get to ad lib a lot and things like that, and the energy's a lot bigger. At least I think, right? But again, having done a lot of like security for like raves and things like that, I'm like, but there's an audience, right? And there's people that want to see this live, so talk to me a little bit about that, man, because I know, again, it's not my cup of tea per se, but I can acknowledge that, hey, I'm kind of wrong there.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't even say you're necessarily wrong because again, it's not everyone's cup of tea, which that was hard for me to understand when I first got into it because I just was like, this is the most incredible thing. Like these shows are insane. How do people not just love this?
Mm,
Over the years now, I understand it and it's um, a lot more of the art is in the production as a whole, I think. So
mm,
with the lighting and the lasers and the visuals, these are all things that I've kind of dipped my toes in and learned a little bit about and learning the art behind all of that. And you put it all together with the music and there isn't so much of a live performance. It's really is a lot more about song selection as a DJ.
mm,
But we're also getting a lot more people who do bring in uh, live elements, and I think that always adds, that missing element, and it's something I want to get a lot more into as well. But it's interesting because I'm kind of the opposite, and it's only been within the last couple years that I've realized how much I love, a more traditional band or just more of the live element. I've been listening to a lot more kind of just like indie rock now,
mm.
and that's just kind of become my cup of tea, even though it never was.
Yeah. What's because you moved to Texas, right, to San Antonio. Uh, what's the electronic music scene look like there, man? Because I know like music's really big, like in Austin and things like that. But was that strategic? Like, hey, I want to come over here because maybe the scene's a little bit better than it is, or not better, like more lively than it is, like in say Utah or something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, the strategy was to get close to Austin because Austin definitely has the better scene. There really actually isn't much of an electronic scene in San Antonio
I
at
see.
all.
Mm,
I've seen a couple underground shows, but it's a lot more like drum and bass or like techno. Just not really my sound. I want to go to some of these, but not shows that I would play. But the thing about Austin is it is not cheap.
mm,
And one of the biggest reasons I've, always wanted to move to Texas is because I'm like, it's so much cheaper out here. Utah was getting so expensive.
mm,
And so it was get out of the snow, go somewhere cheaper. And, if it's close to Austin, Austin has a much better music scene than Utah, which to credit Utah, Salt Lake is doing some pretty cool things. Like they're really putting themselves on the map. So that scene's growing, at a healthy rate out there as well. But San Antonio just was okay, it's cheap and it's only an hour and a half from Austin.
Right, right.
So it's very commutable. I can still very much, push in the Austin scene, but kind of get the comfort of living in San Antonio. And, I love it here. I'm hoping that they do end up building a train between the cities. If they did that, I don't know if I'd leave San Antonio because I've really come to love it out here.
Nice.
But ultimately, if I move, it's going to be closer to Austin.
Hmm. Okay. So like what are some things like, that are coming up in the pipeline for you, man? What's in the near future for Autonex?
So I've got another single dropping at the end of this month. That one's part of my Rise and Shine project. So that's a duo project I've got with my friend that just moved back to Salt Lake.
Hmm.
It's it's where the experimental music really derives from for me. He makes some really incredible stuff. He's been a lot more alternative and indie rock and acoustic stuff, and really wanted to get into the electronic side. And so we started making music together, and it just was so different because he's so creative, and it really pulled me out of my box. Um, so that's going to be the next single. And then the rest of the year, we're dropping an EP in Waterfall. So it'll come out one as a single at a time. And that's a Rise and Shine project as well. So essentially, it'll come out as like a collab between Rise and Shine, Autonex, and Arcadia Light is his name. So that's essentially the plan for this year. Next year, have a few songs planned. I do want to drop an album, even though that's really not the move, especially in the electronic scene. I want to do it because I want to do it.
Yeah.
But next year is when I think I'm going to start to really try to get back into performing.
Mm. Good, good, good. And then, yeah, that's kind of crazy how albums don't really exist anymore. They're not a thing,
Um,
right? Like, I used to be really excited about like, going to the mall and buying a CD, right? Oh, I can't wait for this new CD. And then now it's just like this artist has a new song on Spotify. It's like, but what about, a whole album?
right.
A few months later, this artist has a new song on Spotify. Like, hmm. It's I don't know. It must be like the way people process things now. It's so like, much like an attention span thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Right?
I think an attention span thing and also an algorithm thing. I was kind of
Mm,
talking about this, just the way the algorithm rewards you. It really makes it feel as an artist to become relevant. Uh, you have to always have the spotlight on you, so you always have to put out a hit.
hmm.
Every song just needs to be a hit.
Yeah.
And albums aren't really meant for that.
Mm,
Albums are supposed to be a full piece of work, and you might get some songs that are kind of abstract out of context,
hmm.
which is kind of the beauty of them, right? But again, people don't really have the attention span to listen through a whole album unless it's, a very established name,
Hmm.
or you get the real music lovers. And so me dropping my album is that it's geared towards them of like, hey, anyone who wants to listen through the full thing, like, great, here's this. I'm gonna put out a few of the songs as singles that I feel like should get a little more of a spotlight. But yeah, I agree. It's the way the algorithm works and the way that people's minds work now.
Yeah, for sure. All right, man. So real quick, let me get some shot out of a cannon here, right? So let's say, name maybe three of your top favorite artists in electronic music right now. I know you mentioned you got some indie favorites right now. Let's hear maybe like three of your top favorite artists in like electronic music.
So I would say Champagne Drip now has shot up there. I recently saw him live, and that puts him up there. Rufus Du Sol is a really big one that's kind of been a newer favorite of mine over the last few years. I
Yeah.
think they'll forever stay in my top artists of all time.
Yeah.
And mm, it's hard breaking it down to a third.
Sure.
Um, I would probably have to go with Hello World.
All right. All right.
They're very experimental, great producer.
Three influences that regardless of genre, say this is what makes my music, my music.
So Seven Lions was my original influence. Seven Lions and Adventure Club. Seven Lions more for the music, Adventure Club more for how they did their sets. And then Zed's Dead, I think, has been the most consistent one throughout my entire musical journey.
Right? And then maybe three artists that you would want to, perform alongside in like a festival or concert.
Oh, that one's tough, man.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as just back-to-backs go,
Mhm.
I would say t Tape B, I think would be really cool. I think we could do some really cool stuff. I really think it'd be fun with, oh, probably Jaws. Jaws would be one that I think I'd really have a lot of fun with. And for third, um,
As I shot out of a
oh
cannon, it's on the
yeah,
spot,
man,
right?
that's hard. I'm gonna say Champagne Drip again because
All right.
he's been kind of what I've been gearing my sound a little more towards.
Cool. And final one right here, right? So, like, let's say, like you get those suggestions like on Spotify, right? Shot out of a cannon, three artists, right? You might find me on a playlist with
Oh, maybe Tape B. Um, Rise and Shine, you'll probably find with like Sharks. We do a lot more color based with Rise and Shine.
Mhm.
And then back to Autonex. Hopefully Zed's dead one day.
Mhm.
That's a goal of mine is I'd like to get a Dead Beats release. So
All right.
potentially Zed's dead.
Okay. See, and I'm like, just so people are listening, like, okay, let me get a sense of what this sounds like, what I'm about to check out, So good, yeah, man. Other than that, just want to see like any social media you want to throw out there for people to check you out, follow you.
Yeah, Autonex underscore music on pretty much everything. I do not do Twitter or X anymore.
What the hell is that anymore, right?
I'm so done with it. I just cut it out. I've just decided like I don't care to get any exposure on that.
Real people aren't even on there anyway.
Yeah, it's just a dumpster fire. Um,
Like I never understood it. I think I tried it for like just because everybody has it. I'm like, all right, let me see what it's all about. I'm like, I don't know how to use this shit.
yeah. But so Autonics underscore music on Instagram is probably my,
That's
not even probably. That's my biggest one, and also just the one I feel most comfortable on.
mhm.
You can follow me on TikTok as well. I do not have any posts out yet. I'm
Yeah,
still trying to kind of decide the direction I want to go with my reels. And then YouTube is just Autonics.
cool.
That's where you can find. I'm putting up another similar visualizer for this next song, and at least for all the rest of them, and definitely until I have something else.
Yeah, man. Well, really cool. Anything else you want to throw out there to the podcast world before we close it up?
Oh, no, don't forget to look at your own shadow. We all got one. It's all right to not be afraid of it.
Profound, man. Profound. All right. Well, it's been a lot of fun. Appreciate having you on, man. And, lots of luck and success, man.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
For sure. For everybody listening at home, I appreciate you. Thank you. Fuck you and good night. Subscribe to the Ignorance is Strength podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Like, follow, and share on Facebook and Instagram at Ignorance is Strength Podcast and on Twitter at The Ignorance Pod.